This last November, I got my first chance to play Red Dead Redemption 2. It's been fun when it lets me play it. However, I personally found it to be an inferior game to Grand Theft Auto 5 in just about every way. I could go on for quite some time about why I think it's a disappointment in terms of story, gameplay, mission design. Hell, even the graphics are a step down if you know where to look. It might very well be that my disappointment is largely due to the ridiculously high expectations I had going in, but all that's for another video. Rockstar Games is famous for its cynical tone of centrist satire, which has generally been delivered in a thoughtful manner. There were certainly some exceptions, but in general, Rockstar's refusal to pander to certain groups of people has resulted in some pretty great moments.
We are women, we are free, we're bringing an end to the patriarchy. We are women, hear our pain. We are women, hear our shout. We are women, have no doubt. We are women, we are free. We are
Shut the fuck up! Thank you.
Unfortunately, Rockstar decided to play it safe this time around, portraying a painfully politically correct version of American history. While the majority of this game's political messaging can justifiably be deemed one-sided, it's only fair to point out that there is one side mission that does indeed call out the 40%ers.
Maybe one of these days, the best female for the job will actually be a female.
Before moving on to the main topic of this video, I want to make a point by criticizing how women's suffrage is portrayed in Red Dead Redemption 2. In all available context that the game presents, women's suffrage is portrayed as a black and white issue, when in reality it was just a white issue. Yeah, it turns out the suffragettes didn't take too kindly to those freed slaves. This extends to the first woman to serve in the US Senate, who was an outspoken white supremacist and slave owner. In an attempt to push a political agenda, Rockstar conveniently ignores these truths along with many others, showing the suffragettes as nothing more than perfectly innocent victims who just wanted equality, when in reality that couldn't be further from the truth. Before I move on to the main topic of this video, I'd like to quickly pose a premise. Both political pandering and historical revisionism are only a problem to the extent that they bring quantifiable harm to the quality of the product. Let's apply this logic to the mission where Arthur escorts the suffragettes. The mission is for all intents and purposes on rails, featuring no gameplay beyond moving where the game tells you to move. This mission, which is preachy and based on lies, exists at the expense of the quality of the game.
We are women, we are free, we're bringing an end to the patriarchy.
Shut the fuck up! Thank you.
I want you to keep this standard in mind as we move on from here. So, now that all that's out of the way, I can address the main point of this video. But before I do that, I'd like to make a quick disclaimer. I don't think most of the characters in this game are that well written. You see, in previous Rockstar games, it never mattered that the characters you played as were terrible people, because they were under no illusion about their moral standing. They were all selfish criminals who didn't care much about anyone outside their family and tightly-knit circle of acquaintances. And more importantly, they recognized this.
Man, check this out, homie. I like blowing motherfucking fools' heads off just as much as the next psychotic asshole. But I just don't look at this shit as doing a good deed.
However, in Red Dead Redemption 2, the vast majority of the members of the Vanderlyn gang are under the illusion that themselves and their cohorts are morally comparable to the people who surround them. A premise which becomes more and more laughable as you watch these gang members rob and kill an uncountable number of people throughout the course of Red Dead Redemption 2's story. This is often conveyed by means of Arthur agreeing with other characters about the moral imperfections of America in general.
You Americans are nothing but shysters and traitors and slippery-tongued bull-suckers.
I'm inclined to agree.
For me, this makes Arthur appear as little more than a hypocrite who is willing to equate the supposed shortcomings of all the honest, law-abiding people who inhabit the world of Red Dead Redemption 2 to his murderous cohorts. Once again, I have no problem with the protagonists being irredeemable thugs, it's just the hypocrisy I can't stand.
Here, man. Man, I'm a hypocrite.
Beyond that, Micah is a particularly poorly written character. One second he's massacring a town to get his guns back, and the next he's attempting to broker peace to avoid conflict. Both of the main antagonists are simply forgettable. And most of everyone else is just fine. everyone except Sadie Adler. Sadie Adler is a Mary Sue. The thing is, all the other poorly written characters are just kind of who they are, and the game doesn't put much of a spotlight on their believability. Micah is just an asshole that Rockstar wants you to hate, and that's it. Sadie, however, is the token strong woman that Rockstar needed to squeeze in to appease the journalist class who would undoubtedly take exception to the generally masculine nature of the game. Throughout this video, I will explain the quantifiable harm that Sadie's forced inclusion does to Red Dead Redemption 2's narrative premise. You see, Sadie goes through a change throughout the course of Red Dead Redemption 2. A change is supposed to justify how she went from a woman who had to hide in her cellars her husband was being murdered to a formidable outlaw. And I'm sorry to say that Rockstar doesn't handle her story in a believable or interesting manner. But why should you take my word for it? Let's take a closer look at Sadie's story. Most probably don't realize this, but chronologically Sadie's story starts in Red Dead Online. I first realized this when I saw that there was a stranger mission located at the Adler Ranch. In order to prepare for the journey, I needed two things: a friend and about 2.5 hours worth of alcohol. And with that, our journey began. After setting off from Blackwater, we headed north through the dangerous wilderness. Along the way, we had our share of misadventures.
Oh shit. Oh shit. Okay. I'm gonna turn that off. Give me 1 second.
But despite my friend's lack of proper clothing, we eventually managed to make it to the Adler Ranch.
Oh, you disappeared.
Hey, what the hell do you want? You come to rob me? Or what? Or what? Help, maybe. Good. 'Cause, well, we keep getting robbed.
Oh, wait, it's cold out there. Who are you?
Just here to help.
What's going on? I don't trust drifters, not a one of them.
We gotta trust somebody, Sadie.
Well, I better be able to trust you.
Your husband
'Cause I
dies.
swear, you try to rob us or steal from us, I'll kill you. I don't care what he says.
Quite a woman.
What? Why is she a Mary Sue already?
We lost our wagon. I think it was stolen. And I'm scared to
That's
go out
even
looking
like-
in case this place gets robbed. But I'll pay.
Somehow they went into the negatives with that one.
It's over near Lake Isabella.
We really would appreciate the help.
You sure would. Be safe now.
Now, I actually disagree with my friend's take a little here. All she's done so far is walk into her own home and point a gun at some stranger, and that alone doesn't make her a Mary Sue. The one thing I will mention is that her dialogue when she first walks in is as awkward as fuck.
Oh, wait, it's cold out there. Who are you? Oh, wait, it's cold out there. Who are you? Oh, wait.
So yeah, while she does come off as overconfident and bitchy, her threats aren't backed up by a reality-bending feat or anything. So yeah, she does come off as a bitch, but a bitch is not a Mary Sue. After that, it dropped me into the mission. Alone, for some reason. Great co-op mission design, Rockstar. They wanted me to steal a wagon for some reason, and that went just about as well as my hangover the next morning.
If I have to fucking walk all the way back, I'm done.
The next day, I went back to replay the mission I had failed. And to my surprise, I was just spat out another generic mission.
What happened with that last job then? Clearly didn't go too well. Good you came through. We might have some trouble, and I can't leave here for the time being. Jake's gone to town, the bank or something. Some traders were headed from here to Barrow Lagoon, but never showed up.
This one I actually managed to complete. So yeah, every few hours I would hop back into the game and head to the Adler Ranch, only to find either Jake reading or Sadie cleaning her gun. And one of them would give me another meaningless fetch quest.
We're down a cart. A friend took it to trade in Strawberry, but he should have been back days ago.
Other than a few select lines of dialogue, it wasn't very interesting. When Sadie was there, she sometimes said,
Thanks for helping me out last time. Good, because I didn't want to have to shoot you.
What? Is she saying she would have shot me if I didn't help her out? Or is she saying she would have shot someone other than me for some reason? I have no idea. When Jake was there, he once remarked that Sadie was off.
Helping down the valley.
Not really sure what that means. He goes on to reveal that he's borrowed money from loan sharks, and done a handful of other shady things behind Sadie's back. The missions he gives are surely repetitive and boring, but through his dialogue we get to learn a little bit about Jake. While nothing special, he's an alright character. I only mention this because he contrasts rather harshly to Sadie, who comes off as a cardboard cutout of a tough woman. Eventually I got bored and decided to do some experimenting. I had some fire bottles on me, so I threw one at Sadie and this happened. I also learned that she threatened me when I aimed weapons at her, but her threats were never backed up by any action.
You need to get out of here.
So let's review. What have we learned about Sadie so far? Number 1, she knows how to clean a gun. Number 2, she has no apparent flaws, unlike her husband. Number 3, she's fireproof. I mean, it's pretty clear at this point she's not a very well-written character, but in my opinion she's yet to rise to the level of a Mary Sue. For that, she would need to do something meaningful. I went there one last time for the hell of it, and this happened. Yep, she disappeared. I mean, you can still see her icon on the minimap, but she's not in her usual spot. I wonder where she could have gone. So, Red Dead Redemption 2's story starts with the gang fleeing into the mountains after a failed heist in Blackwater. In search of supplies, Dutch leads Arthur and Micah northeast until they happen across the Adler ranch. The rival O'Driscoll gang have killed Jake, and Sadie has been hiding out in the cellar for the past few days. Or perhaps she never left after we last saw her in Red Dead Online. One important thing to note here. Sadie was completely unable to save her husband, let alone fend off the attackers. Kind of strange considering how cocky she acted in online mode. So Sadie decides to tag along with the gang because her house gets burnt down. Seems not too long ago that thing was almost completely fireproof. Skipping forward, the gang descends from the mountains and sets up camp near Valentine. Sadie, meanwhile, stays with the group. Now, she doesn't actually help out around the camp, rather she just mopes around in one of a few predetermined locations. I was once lucky enough to actually see her move from one spot to another. I understand that she's in mourning over her husband, but at this point, isn't she just kind of leeching off this band of murderous thieves' good graces? This sounds really fucking weird now that I say it out loud. And that brings up another point. Why is the gang even letting her stay there? I mean, to be fair, it doesn't make much sense for the other women to be there either, considering the harsh conditions of gang life. But at least they're helping out around the camp. As an aside, Mike affirms later on in another mission that none of the girls ever put out.
I mean, why the hell do we need a gaggle of girls who won't even fuck you if you put a gun to their head?
That, combined with the fact that you can't actually visit prostitutes in this game, makes the Western setting feel rather inauthentic. Wait a second, Rockstar, I thought sex work was supposed to be empowering for women. Not very progressive if you ask me. Anyways, back to Sadie. So, at least from where I'm standing, it doesn't make much sense for her to want to stay with the gang, or for the gang to allow her to stay at all. I mean, every other stranger in this game Arthur treats like trash. What's so different about her? Let's skip forward to Chapter 3, a mission titled Further Questions of Female Suffrage. At some point, Pearson, the camp cook, noticed that Sadie's been freeloading around the camp, so he's been trying to get her to help out with the cooking. Naturally, she's deeply offended that someone would ask her to partake in the disgraceful act of cooking food.
I ain't chopping vegetables for a living.
So she throws a fit and refuses to do it. And this is where we get a very important line from her. She says,
My husband and I, we shared the work. All of it.
Now, if by sharing the work she means taking turns sending my online character on fetch quests, then sure, I guess. But I'll assume that there was other stuff she got up to that Rockstar was just too lazy to show. Arthur ends up taking Sadie into town with him, and on the way she decides to start reading Pearson's mail.
Dear Aunt Kathy,
You are something else.
I haven't heard from you in some time, so I pray to the Lord above
That your health has not deteriorated further. Blah, blah, blah. It's boring.
Great job, Rockstar. Showing me this ungrateful freeloader violates someone else's privacy in the cringiest possible way is a surefire way to endear me to her character. So yeah, she's a bitch. But the bitch is not a Mary Sue. Let's continue. Upon arriving, Sadie picks up a gun in preparation to rob the general store. I honestly can't tell if she's kidding or not. I'll let you be the judge.
So, what's the plan? I shoot the shopkeeper while you...
No! You insane?
I thought we was outlaws.
Either way, her stilted dialogue is probably an attempt to get the player to view her in a lighthearted context. But for me, it comes off as forced and unnatural. Arthur runs off to the post office, and by the time he gets back, Sadie has changed outfits. She's also being a bitch to the man who is helping her.
Hell, my sister's newborn had more strength than you and he came out bright blue.
I'm trying.
Try harder.
Now, remember kids, women are only truly liberated when they're being terrible to everyone around them.
Get the fuck out of here! Fuck dipshit! And get that camera out of my face!
Alrighty, next is where things get interesting. On the way back, your wagon is accosted by the Lemoyne Raiders gang. And this happens.
How's about this?
Yep, bitch goes psycho and shoots at this dude. So, Arthur and Sadie kill all the raiders and ride back to camp. Arthur explains why this was a reckless thing to do.
That's a lot of mess to make near camp. Hope it don't bring anyone sniffing around.
I have to say, that was pretty impressive. Sadie was able to help Arthur kill all those men, and it's all because she and her husband
shared the work.
I mean, that's the only justification I can think of as to how she could kill all those men. It's not like she's ever had any experience as an outlaw or anything. I mean, if only more women shared the work with their husbands back then. Think of all the female outlaws that are beaten in history books. More on that later. So after that, Mary Sue remains in her change of clothes, which look awful, I might add. You can see her wandering around the camp, occasionally defending its perimeter. Now, at one point I realized that you could antagonize her, and I couldn't help but play with that feature a little too often.
What is with you?
Ow, don't shoot me over.
Not in the mood. Who do you think you are?
Pearson's cooking got a lot more sour since
This
you
is getting real old now.
Hey, taking out on Kieran, not me.
What is this shit?
We should have left her where we found her.
Worse than a child. Do you have a brain in that head of yours?
Hey, taking out on Kieran, not me.
This is what it's come to.
The next mission with her is in Chapter 4. It's called Horseman Apocalypses. The mission doesn't actually have that much to do with her. In fact, it kind of reinforced my suspicion that her character is literally a last-second inclusion in the game. You start the mission by talking to her, but the majority of the ensuing cutscene is Arthur talking with Dutch.
Miss Adler, will you excuse us?
When you gonna let me come robbing with you, Dutch?
My lord, a few more like her, we could take over the whole world. A few more like her.
Then this would be a Ubisoft game.
All of a sudden, the O'Driscolls attack and all hell breaks loose.
O'Driscoll boys are coming! Women and children inside!
Somehow Sadie, who was sitting on the front porch just a minute ago, managed to warp behind the shed in the backyard. I have no idea how or why she got there. Naturally, Sue is able to kill all 3 men with her little knife, despite them each having 60 or so pounds on her, and guns. Well, I guess that's just what happens when a woman and her husband
shared the work.
It makes her completely unstoppable. Here's a more accurate depiction of how things would have gone.
We need you in the house, Mrs. Adler.
Find somewhere to land this, quick.
Over there! They're in a skiff!
We got him running!
What do you do?
Mrs. Adler fought braver than any of us. She is driven by powerful forces I scarcely understand.
There's actually quite a long, pleasant gap before she gets shoehorned back into the story again. Well, it's not exactly pleasant. The gang gets separated after a failed robbery where Hosea and one of the diversity hires gets killed. Also, John gets captured somehow. Honestly, it seems like a somewhat unlikely event if you ask me. I mean, why didn't they just kill him like Hosea? Anyways, Arthur, Dutch, Micah, Javier, and Bill Williamson get stranded on a South Pacific island called Guarma after losing all the gold from the heist. What ensues is the most linear Call of Duty-esque experience I've ever had to endure in a Rockstar game. The only reason this chapter even exists is to shoehorn in some anti-capitalism propaganda. And finally, the gang gets to leave Guarma. I was kind of relieved at this point. I mean, so far Chapter 4 has been awful, but at least we're back in the open world. So the first thing the game makes you do is ride south to Shady Belle while a song plays. Upon arriving, Arthur finds a note addressed to Uncle Tacitus, which is written in Sadie's voice.
Dear Uncle Tacitus.
It essentially tells Arthur where the new camp is. So yeah, Arthur makes it back to the new gang hideout and everyone rejoices. Later that night, Dutch finally makes it back to the hideout. And what ensues is one of the wettest ass-kissings I've ever seen in my life.
It was Mrs. Adler who saved us, Dutch. After the robbery in Saint-Denis, she got us away from the camp before the Pinkertons turned up. Then Mrs. Adler and Mr. Smith drove away the degenerates who were living here.
Mrs. Adler, we owe you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Gee guys, isn't Sadie Adler just so great? God, I mean, look at her, she's fucking perfect. She did it, she saved the day, she's a hero. And to think she was able to pull it off, all because she and her husband
shared the work.
Okay, here's what's wrong with this. Have you ever heard of the concept that when constructing a narrative it's better to show rather than tell? There are certainly individual cases where it's not, but this ain't one of them. Think about this in a critical manner for a second. This is a character that is supposedly going through a change, and it falls upon the writer to give the audience a believable explanation as to how the simple countrywoman transformed into an outlaw. And having all that character development happen off screen is lazy and not terribly convincing. I mean, maybe there was some great moment where she had to overcome some barrier or rise to the occasion. But simply making some vague reference to her doing something amazing off screen and having everyone kiss her ass for it is pathetic storytelling. So the Pinkertons attack, Sadie shoots at people, yeah. A while later, Arthur gets TB. And he gets TB while approaching Sadie's mission marker, I might add. The next mission with Sadie is kind of cool, to be honest, but it's not because of her, of course. After meeting up with Sadie, she leads you to a guy with a hot air balloon, which you plan to take to the prison where John is being held. On the way, Arthur remarks that he's impressed with Sadie, that she's really stepped things up. So let's review. She started off as a freeloader before moving on to being a reckless bitch, then she did some unspecified thing off camera that's supposed to justify why she belongs in the story. Okay. All of a sudden, Sadie says,
Oh, by the way, I've been hunting O'Driscoll boys. Killed 2 of the sons of bitches at a campsite last week.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Shut your goddamn mouth.
Once you get to the site, you meet the guy who owns the balloon. He's a disgusting, horrendous misogynist who thinks that all women belong barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. Dude also happens to be a psychic.
Oh, women can't fly, sir. Are you insane?
So yeah, you separate from Sadie, thank God, and descend into beautifully rendered volumetric clouds. Upon reaching the prison, the guards take their sweet time noticing the giant hot air balloon that just flew into their immediate vicinity. But once they do, they shoot at you and you have to leave. Now, I have a pretty big gripe with the mission design at this point. Why not just rescue John now? I mean, he's right there, and as you'll soon see, the actual prison break is pretty damn underwhelming compared to flying John out on a hot air balloon. Upon returning to the mainland, Arthur sees that Sadie's being chased by the patriarchy. Arthur white knights for her the best he can, providing cover from his vantage point. After a while, someone notices the giant hot air balloon from which Arthur has been providing Sadie cover and shoots the pilot. Arthur grabs a hold of the grip thing and attempts to steer the aircraft down to Sadie. But unfortunately, he is unable to save her. Well, fuck.
I've almost got it! Alright, hold it there, Arthur! Got it! Up. Let's get out of here! I can't hold on much longer! Pull me up! Arthur, hurry! Arthur! Get me up there! Arthur! Pull me up!
Sadie gets saved, the balloon crashes, shoot people, yeah. Fucking what? So, why is it that Sadie needed saving? Well, as she explains, the law got a hold of Como Driscoll, the rival gang leader who she holds responsible for her husband's death. Why is this relevant to her getting chased around? I have no clue. This is never explained. Wouldn't it be publicly available information that such a high-profile person was soon to be hanged? In public? Why'd she have to get some pushback killed over that information? Whatever. Sadie goes on to say the plan is that she and Arthur will get a boat, sneak in, and extract John from the fields. Well, if we still had a hot air balloon, we could have used that to break him out. Too bad it was Crash, saving Mrs. Perfect from a fate no one would lament. Whatever, on to the jailbreak. So, the jailbreak mission starts with Arthur approaching Sadie and Abigail, who are arguing. It turns out that Abigail wants to tag along with Sadie and Arthur. Sadie insists that she can't come with them, and Arthur backs her up. She claims,
It'll be quicker and easier with just the two of us.
Now, this part really nails in how bizarre the storyline has gotten. Sadie, who became an outlaw like 5 minutes ago, is somehow more qualified than Abigail, who's been a member of the gang for 5 years. Come on, at this point no one can be taking any of this shit seriously. It's just silly. But wait, I know, she and her husband
Shared the work.
Yes, you can't forget about the work sharing. After landing the boat, Arthur and Sadie climb up the nearest guard tower. Sadie demands that you shoot both of the guards who are guarding who appears to be John.
Oh, yeah. I see 2 guards. Okay, take them out, and let's go get our boy.
Now, the first time I played this, I had an idea. Why shoot both of them with my rifle when I could silently take them both out with my bow? Because this game was made by Rockstar, that's why not. Now, if this cutscene's choreography makes any sense to you, then I have a bridge to sell you.
Where is he? You see him?
No! You! Mister! You know John Marsden?
He ain't working today. Put the gun down, lady.
No. You put the gun down. Now. Where's John Marston?
Next, Arthur takes this random guy hostage and starts marching him towards the prison. And if you believe a little as in physically small woman is capable of knocking out all these guards, I have an even bigger bridge to sell you. Hey Rockstar, have you ever considered the possibility that making all of the enemies cartoonishly weak cheapens the value of defeating them? No, I don't suppose you have. So, Sadie and Arthur continue approaching the prison, and for some reason, instead of shooting these 2 idiots where they stand, they end up letting John out. Why? How does any of this make sense? The dude himself already said he was worthless as a bargaining chip.
So, you a popular employee, my friend?
Not especially.
Not especially.
Why the hell would they exchange John for this nobody, only to lose however many dozens of men trying to get him back? It's fucking retarded. And to top all that off, they don't even chase them after they leave the island! Now, if all of that made sense to you, then this bridge can be yours for just $9.99 motherfucking cents! They ride back to camp, no one follows them, it's magic, I guess. After making it back to camp, Dutch is mad at Arthur. Not Sadie, just Arthur. Great. A few missions later, we are jerked away from our charity work with Chief Drippingcock, only to be wrangled into doing another mission with Sadie. Oh joy. So, Como Driscoll is due to hang in Saint Denis, and Sadie, Dutch, and Arthur are there to make sure all goes to plan. Now, I want you to take a second to study Sadie's demeanor in this scene. Just a couple months ago, she was a housewife. Shared the work! Okay, fine. She was a housewife that shared the work equally with her husband. For a second, let's set aside the rapid morphing of reality around Sadie to justify her presence in the game, and contrast Sadie's behavior now with her behavior in both online mode and at the beginning of Red Dead Redemption 2's story. Now tell me, is there any reason that her character's morphed into this crude persona of a rough outlaw type, other than some British thumb's random discretion? I understand that she's still sad that Jakey died, but she wasn't exactly going to bars and getting drunk right after the gang set up camp near Valentine. No, her behavior here requires a change in personality. A change from a responsible wife to a rugged outlaw. And for a change in a character to occur, there has to be some form of conflict for the character to adapt to. And ever since that humbled widow mourning at Horseshoe Overlook, Sadie's yet to face a single shred of adversity. Every conflict she's faced has just been brushed aside like it was nothing. This means she's had absolutely no reason to change as a person. And if I know anything, it's that people only change if they have to. All development of her character has been completely contrived, and it makes for an extremely boring storyline. In order to go incognito, Mary Sue dresses up as a slave to the patriarchy. They make their way to the gallows in a slow linear sequence that was just a joy to replay. Upon reaching the gallows, the men both go off to pursue a suspicious individual. Suddenly, something quite unprecedented happens. Red Dead Redemption 2 actually introduces some player choice by allowing the player 2 different ways to reach the roof. This is some serious depth for a Rockstar game. Honestly, more depth than I think I can handle. Either way, Arthur kills this guy and gets his gun.
Is to be carried out, and your sentence, Como Driscoll, is carried out if our civilization is to prosper. Como Driscoll, may God, in his infinite wisdom, have mercy upon your soul. Whenever you are ready.
Now you know how it feels to watch somebody you love die. You ruined my life!
Now, I have a serious question about the narrative here. Why did the Thumb decide that Sadie doesn't get to kill Como Driscoll herself? I mean, revenge was her only real reason for her to exist in the story at all, and they couldn't even get that right. Her recklessness is just getting silly at this point. It's almost as if she's a cartoon character. She can do whatever insane shit she wants with no consequences, and the audience just has to accept it. Another thing I thought I'd mention is that Dutch says more words to Sadie in this one mission than in every other mission in the game combined. Excluding the first mission, all other instances of her interacting with anyone feel an awful lot like they were pasted in at the last second. Kind of supports my theory that she was forcefully inserted into the game after the story was near completion, doesn't it? Now, this next mission is actually optional, so if for any reason you think that Sadie Adler is an annoying character, you don't have to play it. But I did for some reason. Sadie, who now officially has absolutely no reason to remain in the story, asks Arthur to help her massacre a bunch of the remaining O'Driscolls that are holed up at a ranch. She pretty heavily implies that she's doing all this to get revenge on a fat feller with a beard, but as you'll soon see, Rockstar forgets about this plot point about as quickly as they made it up. Naturally, Sadie and Arthur are able to dispose of like 20 guys on their own. I'd like to quickly level criticism about the gameplay in this game. In the best of classic westerns, skill and gunplay was mainly dependent on quickness and surprising your enemies. And in that respect, Red Dead Redemption 2 fails as an homage to western genre. Not only is the gunplay extremely repetitive and mindless, it's really silly for someone like Arthur to be nothing less than a one-man army who's able to rush into an enemy stronghold without a care in the world. It's even sillier for someone like Sadie to be a one-woman army, considering the fact that she's been spared the hardships that every other outlaw in this game has had to overcome.
Like I told you, my husband and I shared all the work.
Sadie!
Piece of shit!
Because I meet these people all the time. I don't know how to suck them out of that place. I don't know how to get them out of that dark place.
You know, when you look at America, people sometimes ask me, you know, what's wrong with America? Look, this is the greatest country in the world. It's the greatest people in the world. But sometimes we forget common sense. Just simple things that we need to remember. Like, basically, you just don't reward bad behavior. Just think about that. How commonsensical is that? Just do not reward bad behavior.
They turned me into a monster, Arthur.
They sure did, didn't they? This is a good moment to bring up a question. What does it mean to be an outlaw? Is it some rough, undesirable lifestyle? Or is it all just fun and games? Sadie can't seem to make up her mind.
So, what's the plan? I shoot the shopkeeper while you...
No! You insane?
I thought we was out.
Don't mention it. I would ride with you again, Mrs. Adler, if you will ride with me.
Maybe. If you prove you can handle yourself.
Well, we need to talk. Mrs. Adler, will you excuse us?
When you gonna let me come robbing with you, Dutch?
Forgive me, but I can't take a scene like this seriously when so much of her personality early on was built on this cringy, lighthearted take on gang life, especially since there's been no genuine development of her character. It just comes off as inconsistent and contrived. The last part of Sadie's story I'll cover in detail is her role in the final mission of the main game. Sadie and Arthur go to save Abigail from haircuts, alone, because the writers over at Rockstar decided that Dutch was not supposed to be a bad guy. Sadie, concerned for Arthur's health, says he should cover her while she runs in and saves Abigail. Naturally, she says this in the bitchiest way imaginable.
Just do it my way, honey. It's for the best.
We should have left her where we found her.
After ascending the lighthouse, there's gameplay. Blah blah blah. Eventually Sadie makes it to where Abigail's being held. Suddenly something interesting happens. Yep, she is easily subdued by a single man. Well, that's it, boys. Pack your bags. She's not a Mary Sue anymore. Well, boys, pack your bags. She's not a Mary Sue anymore. This whole video has been rendered pointless. Everyone can go home now. I mean, sure, she was inexplicably able to kill 3 armed men with her little knife after no experience as an outlaw, but now that the erect appendage decided that Sadie's recklessness suddenly bears consequences, well, that just erases the entire need for this video to exist. It's gone. I deleted it. What are you still doing here? Anyways, moving on. Arthur charges towards the trading post, adding to the number of honest men he's dragging the hell with him. He walks in, kills 2 dudes. Obvious trap in 3, 2, 1.
Calm down, Mr. Morgan. That's quite a cough.
Sure. Tuberculosis. I'll be dead soon. And you with me, Mr. Milton?
You'll be dead, sure. But I'm gonna be just fine.
What's with all this gloating? Why would you say any of this to a man whom you plan to shoot in a few seconds?
Whenever I should have had a gun in my right hand, I thought of you. Now I find you in exactly the position that suits me.
When you have to shoot, shoot, don't talk.
You're still a yapping dog, Mr. Milton.
And surprise, Mary Sue isn't the one who finishes off haircut. I have to say, that was pretty easy. I mean, look at that guy, he was pretty damn pathetic. Remember when Rockstar was capable of crafting strong, memorable antagonists like Officer Tenpenny? I fear those days are long past. Next, Sadie gets untied and the 3 run to mount their horses. Blah blah blah, more shooting gallery. Ooh, what's this, a cutscene?
You're good women. Good people. The best.
Okay, let's pause a second. Can you really say that these 2 women are good people? I mean, I guess Abigail has been staying with the gang primarily because she wants Jack to be taken care of. So, even though her assistance around the camp has no doubt aided the various gang members who have committed unspeakable atrocities, she was doing it for a noble cause, her child. I'll be charitable and put her at neutral. Sadie, however, oh boy. Sadie didn't have a single reason to stay with the gang after they left the mountains. After reviewing her story, her only motivation seems to be revenge and a general desire to have fun doing bad things.
When you gonna let me come robbing with you, Dutch?
How the hell could anyone interpret her as a good person? Many of the characters in this game were born into a life of crime, but Sadie? She deliberately chose this life for herself. Maybe she wanted revenge, but she had no real excuse to run with criminals. It's not like she actually learned anything from any of the gang members at any point. Sadie just magically possessed extraordinary abilities when it was convenient for the narrative, and lost them when it wasn't. Reality is just manipulated around her so the writers over at Rockstar can shoehorn a woman outlaw into their cowboy game. I won't spoil many more details beyond this point, mostly because I think the point's been driven in well enough. All I'll say is that in the epilogue she becomes a bounty hunter, and it's even cringier than before.
Thought I told you to leave it, Bubba.
And I thought to myself who this little girl thinks she's telling anything to.
Enjoy your drink in peace. I ain't got no business with you right now.
What that mean?
For the last time, leave me alone.
Or what?
You simply cannot tell me with a straight face that this doesn't remind you of a little kid playing with his toys. There's no amount of money you could pay me to endure this shit a second longer. So now it's time to ask the question, is Sadie Adler a Mary Sue? To stay objective, let's use the Wikipedia definition for the term Mary Sue. A Mary Sue is an idealized and seemingly perfect fictional character. Typically, this character is recognized as an author insert or wish fulfillment. They can usually perform better tasks than should be possible given the amount of training or experience, and are usually able through some means to upstage the protagonist of an established fictional setting, such as by saving the hero. Other traits of a Mary Sue include bending the rules of the story, narrative characterization, and natural laws of the setting, and being an over-centralizing figure. So, is Sadie Adler a Mary Sue?
work. We shared the work. My husband and I shared the work.
What is this shit?
Boys keep wasting time.
That's us told them.
At her core, the Mary Sue is essentially a conflict-free character. All of the Sue's problems are always either solved by someone else, or reality is actively bended around her to justify her accomplishments. And what's worse, all of the Mary Sue's shortcomings are ignored by everyone around her. Sadie is a terrible person whom no one has any reason to like or look up to. But for some reason, everyone's dialogue around her is unnaturally bent to spell her praises. This is obvious in her first mission, Further Questions of Female Suffrage, where she continuously does things that should result in ridicule, but for some reason Arthur just continuously responds with praise. Another thing that annoyed me is how during the jailbreak mission, John was continuously degraded in order to contrast him with Sadie, therefore raising her social standing at John's expense.
You always seem to need rescuing, Marston. You just relax and enjoy yourself, John. Leave the real work to them as can still handle it. Thanks.
They're gonna be on our tails soon enough if you boys keep wasting time.
That's us told them.
Not only is this disrespectful to John's character, it straight up doesn't make any sense. At this point in the story, Sadie's been shown to be nothing but a reckless bitch, and it really seems like John was captured by the Pinkertons at no fault of his own. It really feels like John getting captured off screen was just a really lazy plot device to give Sadie something to do later in the story. The biggest problem with her character really isn't how she breaks reality in one-off instances. It's how the rest of the story is just jerked around to cater to her presence in the game. I really don't care if Rockstar wants to have this prominent female outlaw in their game, I just want it to make sense. Tell me, what's wrong with Sadie having to work hard to earn something that she obviously doesn't possess from the get-go? For feminists, it isn't enough for a female character to become great, she has to inherently be great. Sadie having to earn her place in the story would be an admission that women are flawed, just like all people are, and certain ideologues just can't accept that. The really annoying thing is that Rockstar has gotten Sadie's story right before, in the same goddamn game. After Arthur gets TB, a side mission opens up at this location north of Annisburg. Upon arriving at a homestead, Arthur finds a widow named Charlotte crying over a grave. It's pretty clear that she'll die on her own, so Arthur shows her how to hunt and tells her how to skin a rabbit. She thanks him and remarks that she most likely would have starved if not for his assistance. At this point, the player has a choice. You can continue helping her, or you can just forget about her. If you decide to come back a second time, Arthur finds that she's struggling to hit anything with her gun, so he gives her some advice on how to shoot. She then offers Arthur some of the rabbit he shot for her, but shortly after accepting the offer, he collapses due to his weakened state. This is actually a clever narrative trick, because she then has to offer him housing while he recovers, helping alleviate the feeling that she's solely a drain on him. Also, throughout this process, you can see both in her words and her body language that she isn't entirely comfortable with a stranger's help at first. But as Arthur continues to help her, she begins to trust him more and more. Arthur can visit her one more time, where she thanks him and gives him a kiss on the cheek. Then, if you come back years later, you see that because of your influence, she was put on the right track to survive. However, if you don't play past the first mission, she's found dead instead. Now, not everything's perfect about her questline. Skinning a rabbit isn't that easy. Trust me, I've done it before. In my humble opinion, her attire is pretty overdone when you come back years later. And at one point, she remarks,
I couldn't be happier.
Well, I don't know, maybe you'd be a little bit happier if your husband was still alive? I mean, I'm not saying that to redeem his memory you have to go on a murderous rampage every other minute like this Mary Sue I happen to know of, but it is a poor choice of words that should be criticized. Lastly, the whole thing just feels extremely rushed, but that's more so because her story is just a side mission. It's pretty disappointing that Rockstar didn't fill their independent woman quota with a character like Charlotte rather than Sadie, but what can you do? Oh, you could make a mini-doc complaining about it, that's what. The next thing I want to address is the historical accuracy of female outlaws and bounty hunters. Yes, there were a few female outlaws, like 10. And don't you give me that there were others who went underreported on. Female outlaws of the Wild West were given more media attention than their male equals, and we both know why that is. I found an interesting article documenting them, which I will have linked in the description. So let's see how Sadie Adler compares to real-life female outlaws. Number 1. Pearl Hart. Pearl was a spoiled rich kid who married an abusive drunkard with whom she had 2 children, who were sent to live with her mother. Some reports claim that she and a former miner named Boot started a scheme where they would rob men after she'd lure them to a room. Either way, in 1899, Hart came up with a plan to rob a stagecoach with Boot. It was a terrible plan. After the robbery, they got lost and were later picked up by law enforcement just 3 miles away from where the robbery took place. Well, that's just what you get when you let a woman do the planning. Humorously enough, the author also remarks how Hart said, "I shall not consent to be tried under a law in which my sex has no voice in making." I love how feminists have resorted to using criminals to argue their talking points. The second female outlaw on this list was named Laura Bullion. Bullion? Her father was a bank robber and he let her be a prostitute as a teenager. She was part of the Wild Bunch gang and, well, she was fucking them. There's some evidence she helped out with one train robbery in Montana, but it's pretty obvious they wouldn't have let a man of equal strength and stature tag along with him if he had nothing else to offer. And, well, what she had to offer was her ass, which was passed around between various members of the gang every few months. The third one is Belle Siddons. Siddons? Belle fell in love with a stagecoach robber named Archie McLaughlin. She would spy on people and give him tips on which stagecoaches to rob. Turns out she was pretty terrible at it, and her incompetence ended up getting poor Archie killed. There isn't much more information on Belle, she doesn't even have her own Wikipedia page. The best alternative I could find is this random site that quotes Karl Marx in the middle of her biography for absolutely no reason. Number 4, Rose Dunn. Dunn? Rose was also a fucking member of the Wild Bunch gang. That's pretty much it. Most of her Wikipedia page is about the dude she was fucking. The 5th is Sarah Jane Newman, aka Sally Skull, aka Sally Skull, aka Sally Skull. There isn't much available information on Sally, not that there's too much with any of these ladies, but if one of these women is to resemble a Mary Sue, it's this one. One European tourist remarked that he heard someone describe her as many things, one of which being a perfect female desperado. Not exactly a great source, and history has no doubt embellished her story along with most other outlaws. But you know what, I'll give you this one. I mean, she reportedly aided the Confederacy during the Civil War, but if you still want her, feminist, she's yours. It's also worth noting that a descendant of hers is running around, giving 4 out of 5-star reviews to people who'd write about Sally, her great-great-grandmother. So what do you say, Mary Creasy? Can I get in on some of that B- action? Number 6 is Mary Catherine Harrony. Kate. I'll call her Kate. After working as a prostitute earlier in life, Kate got married to Doc Holliday. That's it. I have absolutely no idea why she's on this list. Doc Holliday wasn't even an outlaw. Kate was also known for having a big nose. Number 7 is Belle Starr. Only a fucking name I can pronounce. After the death of her first husband, a horse thief named Jim Reed, she ended up marrying a Cherokee man named Samuel Starr, who ran the Starr Gang. Now, I'd never heard of the Starr Gang before, so I entered Starr Gang in the search bar in hopes of finding out more about it. But unfortunately, the only results I got were about a hip-hop duo called Gang Starr. I couldn't even find anything when I searched for Samuel Starr. I only found mention of him again when I checked her Wikipedia page. Now here's why I point this out. Why is it that she has a Wikipedia page and her husband doesn't? The only reason is that she's a chick and he's a dude. No one cares about lesser known outlaws like Sam Starr because he's just not that interesting. And the only reason that Belle Starr is interesting is because she's a chick. Belle apparently planned the gang's robberies, but I couldn't find any evidence that she actually went along on any of them. Etta Place is the 8th woman on this list. She was fucking Butch Cassidy and later the Sundance Kid. Watch Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It's a good movie. Number 9, Eleanor Dumont. Fucking French! I couldn't confirm many of the details of Eleanor's backstory, but she was a gambler and a pretty good one at that. However, she seems to be better known for the fact that she began growing a mustache later in life. Unfortunately, after getting into a lot of gambling debt in Bodie, California, she committed suicide by overdosing on morphine. And that's it. I don't know why she's on this list. Is it that suicide's illegal? Did she become an outlaw by committing suicide? Number 10, Bonnie Parker. Bonnie Parker? From Bonnie and Clyde? This author is having to stretch all the way to 1930 to round out the list. How can 1930 be considered the Wild West? Alrighty, now that that list is out of the way, let's go over the list of female bounty hunters. Alrighty, that was a much shorter list. I guess it's hard to get ahead when you can't just sleep with a bull, huh? I mean, it's seriously laughable that Rockstar decided to make the hardest female diversity push into one area where it'd stand out the most, with both Sadie in the epilogue and the flagship bounty hunter in Red Dead Online. Anyways, let's take a second to contrast Sadie with the real-life female outlaws of the Wild West. 3 of the ladies on this list can't at all be described as outlaws of the Wild West, so they're out. I suppose we can chalk that up to the author's incompetence. Of the remaining 7, 2 are about as incompetent as the author, 3 of them seem to be pretty passive, and the final 2, Belle and Sally, seem to know a thing or two about what they were doing. Belle seemed more like a matriarchal figure who most likely learned about many of the workings of a criminal enterprise through her marriage to Jim Reed. Doesn't sound much like Sadie, that one. Sally's exploits were so extensive and well known that her fan club consists of her great-great-granddaughter. Sadie, on the other hand, her fan club consists of a bunch of horny teenage boys who wish that they didn't have to be the men in relationships. So far, it's kinda looking like Rockstar might have actually taken a few liberties when portraying Sadie's character. Who could have foreseen this? Now is a decent time to note that of the 4 women who lived through the Civil War, 3 of them were in some way connected to the Confederacy or its remnants. Sheesh, between the suffragettes and all these female outlaws, I'm starting to think that women in general might just be irredeemable bigots. If you are a woman and you happen to be watching this video, please leave a comment below telling us why you hate niggers. Okay, I think that now's a good time to clarify that much of what I've said throughout the past few minutes was largely hyperbole. It wasn't entirely fair for me to dismiss all these ladies as either incompetent sluts or 18th century Nazi equivalents. In order to explain what I mean, let's take a look at Red Dead Redemption 2's portrayal of female gang members. No, not Sue, I'm talking about the other women. In Red Dead Redemption 2, all of the women are seemingly always cooped up at the camp like some 50s housewife stereotype. While in real life, the female gang members would more often than not be the ones to go into town to get supplies because no one knew who they were. It would honestly be much more realistic if the men were the ones cooped up at the camp. Seriously, how is it that a bunch of wanted men are able to just ride into town without a care in the world? Shouldn't bounty posters with all of their faces on them be posted like literally everywhere after the failed heist in Blackwater? All of this tells me that Rockstar either didn't do their research into this aspect of outlaw life, or that they just didn't care. It's also worth noting that there were certainly female sharpshooters, but there's a huge gap between being able to shoot a gun and being willing and or able to endure the rough life of an outlaw. My overall point is not at all that the vast majority of women are incompetent sluts. It's more so that being a criminal is extremely difficult and undesirable to most women. This is largely due to the fact that women are more sensitive than men. Jesus, calm down. I didn't mean to offend anyone. No, I actually mean this in a scientific sense. On average, women actually possess superior sensory capabilities than men. This includes the perception of touch, taste, smell, sound, and vision. But perhaps most relevant of all, the neurological experience of pain is more intense for women on average. Charles Murray recently published a book called Human Diversity, The Biology of Gender, Race, and Class. It is nowhere near as controversial as it sounds. Charles pretty much sticks to well-substantiated cross-cultural surveys to make all of his points. And much of the information within goes a long ways to explain why women in general would be extremely adverse to the prospect of a life as an outlaw. As for so many women being despicable racists, I have a theory I wish to pose. Take a look at this chart from battlefields.org. It shows that of the men in the South who were eligible to serve in the Civil War, the overwhelming majority did. On top of that, about 45% of the men who did serve were either killed, wounded, captured, or missing. This obviously created a massive disparity in terms of sexual demographics in the South. Not all Southerners were fighting to suppress the black population. In fact, there's a decent amount of evidence to suggest that the Civil War was fought largely over tariffs. But there were certainly a good amount of Southerners who did truly believe that blacks needed to be held to a different standard under the law than whites. It's said that back during medieval times, when a castle was under siege, and all the soldiers defending the castle were either dead or wounded, the defending side would sometimes use women and children as a last line of defense in the face of certain destruction. History certainly does have a habit of repeating itself, doesn't it? Remember near the beginning of the video when I said, both political pandering and historical revisionism are only a problem to the extent that they bring quantifiable harm to the quality of the product. I think that still holds true in face of all this historical context. Rockstar could have created a female outlaw that wasn't reflective of reality, but still made sense within the context of the game. But they didn't. We got Sadie. For example, Sadie's motivations were unclear and pretty aimless up until the Hot Air Balloon mission where Lord Thumb suddenly remembered that Sadie's husband was killed by the O'Driscoll gang. I personally don't find revenge to be a very good plot device. Redemption maybe, but revenge more often than not devolves into mindless killing that cheapens the depth of the story and all involved characters. The original Death Wish is a good example of a story that goes down the path of redemption rather than revenge. The only way they could have made her presence in the story work is if she had a believable motivation beyond hatred, such as that human instinct noblest of all, a mother's desire to protect her young. It would have been kind of tricky to make it work, but Sadie's story would have been much more interesting if Colm O'Driscoll had taken her child, and her motivation was to get him or her back, kind of like Sarah Connor in Terminator 2. Actually, take a second to picture how terrible Terminator 2's premise would be if Sarah Connor's motivation wasn't to protect her son, John. Oh wait, we know exactly what that looks like. The other huge problem is that Sadie was essentially able to just decide to become an outlaw action hero, as if it was as simple as a fucking choice. This essentially makes a larger premise of Red Dead Redemption 2 completely unworkable. Let's take a second to contrast Sadie with the other women that inhabit the world of Red Dead Redemption 2. Tell me, why is this woman not able to defend herself in this instance? I can only assume it's because she and her husband didn't share enough work. See this woman right here? I bet she didn't share much work with her husband. This one can't be more than 10 or 12% work shared if you ask me. Don't even get me started on this one, 3% at most. Arthur's sweetheart, what's her name? I mean, if only her and her husband shared the work, she could have solved all of her family's problems without Arthur's help. I'll be charitable and put her at 7% work shared. The real big question here is who shared more work with their husband, Sadie or Black Belle? The world might never know. To be completely fair, Red Dead Redemption 2's premise was already broken by a bevy of other factors. These factors include, but are not limited to, the unexplainable power disparity between the protagonists and everyone else, the fact that the gang continuously sets up their hideouts just minutes away from the nearest town, the fact that the Pinkertons could have attacked almost every one of the gang hideouts at any point but didn't for no apparent reason, the fact that in typical Rockstar fashion, near the end of the game, the protagonists are able to just solve all their problems by just walking up and killing the bad guys without a care in the world. And many, many other factors that contribute to the overall premise being just a lazy mess that just gets worse and worse the longer it has to justify itself. Still, I hold that Sadie's the worst offender here. Her presence in the epilogue makes it unplayable for me. I just don't want to subject myself to that shit a second longer than I have to. It's really repetitive anyways, just mission after mission of bounty hunter nonsense where you and Sadie
shared the work.
Alright, I'll stop. During the process of making this video, Rockstar's lead writer, Dan Houser, known affectionately as The Thumb, announced that he will be leaving Rockstar Games. As hard as I've been on him throughout the course of this video, he was himself largely responsible for the success of the Rockstar brand. Even though I thought Red Dead Redemption 2 is a mediocre game in nearly every respect, the narrative was nowhere near as terrible as the tripe that other AAA studios are putting out. In fact, I have to admit that Duchess' fall into madness does appear to be largely reminiscent of George Orwell's criticism of socialists in The Road to Wigan Pier, a book that Orwell wrote while he himself was very much a socialist. It's pretty difficult to interpret Duchess' story as anything other than a tale of a communist with a god complex who inevitably falls into ruin as his idealistic fantasies clash with that oh-so-harsh reality. Dan Houser might very well be in a similar position to 1937 George Orwell right now. To be clear, I still think that Red Dead Redemption 2's story was a mess, especially in the second half, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't some self-awareness baked in at some level. It seems pretty likely that he largely agrees with Dutch's worldview, but somewhere deep down he likely realizes that his ideas are completely unworkable. Hey, a funny piece of trivia for you. In GTA 5, there's an anarcho-commune at this location north of Mount Chiliad, and it mocks many of the themes that Red Dead Redemption 2 expects you to take seriously.
This is private property.
Dan Houser used to be capable of making fun of his own ideology, but in Red Dead Redemption 2, his cynicism mostly got the best of him. Maybe he could have made a return to form with GTA 6. It's a shame we'll never find out. His brother, Sam Houser, is still with the company, though I'm not entirely sure what his role is there at the moment. At the end of the day, I'm really just looking for a narrative premise that I can take seriously, and sadly, I can't say that about Red Dead Redemption 2. GTA 5 wasn't perfect, but it was still heads and shoulders above any other game out there when it came to presenting a world that felt real. Red Dead Redemption 2, however, more often than it should, comes off as a cartoon, and that's not what I'm looking for in a Rockstar game. I want to be able to take the characters and their motivations seriously, but when your goal is to push a political message rather than create real characters, you lose me. And you're gonna lose a lot more people if you don't correct your course, Rockstar. You're still coasting off of the success of GTA 5, but there are a lot of people out there that think Red Dead Redemption 2 was an overrated game for a bevy of reasons. And when GTA 6 comes out, they might not look at the Rockstar logo on the box the same way as they did the last time. As for further questions of female suffrage, I want women to be able to vote, I swear. I just also don't want America to go bankrupt.